right, just bring everybody to attention and welcome you this afternoon to, it's a bit warm in here, so appreciate your patience. So the panel we have today, we have a great group of panelists to talk about nature and biodiversity and mining's impact on that, and really our responsibility as we go forward to preserving nature, rebuilding nature, however we look at it. So before I start, I'll just ask each of the panelists to introduce themselves. I'm Peter Bryant, I'm the board chair for the Development Partner Institute. So Vicente?
Yeah, sure. Good afternoon, everyone. Glad to be here. My name is Vicente Melo. I'm a senior vice president with AECOM. I lead AECOM's operation in Brazil, and also globally I lead AECOM's technical advisory practice group.
Thank you. Robin?
Hi, I'm Dr. Robin Armstrong from the Natural History Museum in London, and I run our mining consultancy sector.
Yes, Ali. Good afternoon to all of you. I'm the CEO of the National Center for Environmental Compliance, who's responsible to make sure complying to environmental law in Saudi Arabia.
Thank you. Terry?
Terry Castus. I'm Chief of Strategy and Business Development at the Prince Mohammed bin Salman Royal Reserve.
Thank you. So just some contextual remarks is really around, what is our responsibility for environmental stewardship and in particular biodiversity? And I think, there's two dimensions to this. There's a very complex legacy that we have from all the mining that's been conducted over, several hundred years that we still have with us. And then as we go forward, what are the challenges in terms of both existing operations and new mines that we're designing? And I think one of the challenges we're going to talk about is from a performance base, should a mining company just perform in accordance with the regulations of a country? Should it perform at a standard that's given by the industry? Or should it set a standard, which I think they should, where they become net contributors environmentally, socially, and economically, and always perform better than any regulation? And then finally, with indigenous values, how do we integrate how the indigenous people and their values, and they think about biodiversity and nature into mining, and we don't do a good job there. So, and obviously the role of standards and transparency, a bit like the last panel, what role do they have? So Vicente, let's start with you. So sure. Brazil, you guys have, have had a set of unfortunate incidents,
yep,
which we acknowledge, a huge legacy with mining, a lot of go-forward mining. What is that? I mean, you've been on a very difficult journey the last few years, obviously, because of the incidents. What can we learn from your journey in this regard?
Thank you for the question, Peter. I think there is a lot of lessons to be learned from Brazil. So mining been happening in Brazil for centuries, and about 8 years ago there was a tailing dam that failed in Brazil, and then a second one 3 years later, and this led to the understanding that there was a need to completely transform the mining sector in Brazil. So we've been working on this. We are the expert advisors to the Brazilian authorities on this transformation, how to deal with this legacy that has hundreds of mining sites, hundreds of tailing storage facilities that when they were, designed and operated and built, we didn't know things that we know today, and there are huge negative externalities out there that need to be quantified, identified, so that we can have plans to deal with this. So countries, like the super region and the kingdom that are coming to this industry later, can extremely benefit from those lessons learned, so they can leapfrog completely those legacies and those issues that will have to be dealt by Brazil, Chile, Peru, South Africa, and many other places in the world.
Great, thank you. Robin, we've talked about nature positive and what that looks like and role of offsets. How do you think about that approach?
Contextually for us, from it's a Natural History Museum, most of our collection is about biodiversity. We'll have the rock stuff as well. And our big question for it is, what would nature positive mining actually look like? And we were talking earlier, and it's not just about the now, what happens when we do things right now. It's about how do we protect that legacy and ensure that legacy going forward. So in the short term, there is no short-term fix. So how do we change the industry to look beyond what might be mine closure, however we might want to define that?
Yep.
And that's where we're coming from, is what methods, what metrics do we need to understand what is a nature positive outcome?
Right.
So, yeah.
Okay, no, that's good. So, Ali, that gets to you, I guess. I mean, your organization is about environmental excellence and standards. when you think about excellence in that term, what level of performance should mining companies be striving for in terms of biodiversity and nature?
Yeah, Peter, thank you very much. I think first, as a Saudi, I'm very proud about the announcement of the mineral resources that been announced by Mr. Al-Khrayef, His Excellency, which equal to 9.4 trillion riyals. I think this is make us as Saudis proud, where this could help us to achieve our economic diversification policy and plans, and also create the jobs for nations and for the local community. But on the other side, there is the impact of the risk of this type of industry, and the perception about that, which is sometimes not truly. We as an NCEC, we are very proud. We have a team of Saudi women's and men's. We passionate to make sure that we protect the environment, and make sure that to do that through a different strategy where it's based and built on trust. First thing, we are building a new model for compliance in the nation, where it's built on more focus on industry itself, where they monitor themselves, they make sure that they measure their compliance and reporting to us, and changing our model of compliance monitoring toward using the technologies, toward using the capable human resources, and make sure that we focus on risk-based facilities. Other thing is promoting the profitability of the economy, but on the other side, make sure that this profitability comes with the right planning to make sure that we have an environmental sustainability.
Yeah.
Also fostering a partnership between government and the business. Make sure that that will help actually to build that trust. And the final thing is the capacity building of our nation, innovation and technologies, and make sure we have the human resources that will take us toward what we want to achieve, from using our sovereignty of our natural resources, but also protecting our nation and environment.
Great, Ali, thank you. Terry, you've got a lot of experience both here in the Kingdom, but also a lot in South Africa around protected environmental areas and national parks. And a reasonable amount of mining happens either adjacent to or on. And how do you think about this mining in terms of that, and what can we learn or draw in from your experiences?
I think that protected areas can play quite a pivotal role, not just in mining, but also in environmental compliance, because I think they're an opportunity for higher standard setting and monitoring of those standards. But I also think they can play a very central role in the nature positive debate, because part of the challenge with mining is it's usually restoration after the fact, and there's little opportunity for it during the operational phase of the life cycle. So offsets and protected areas can offer mines an opportunity to invoke the sort of nature positive aspect of the business very early on in the game.
Fantastic. Yeah, I think there's a lot. How many miners come and talk to you? That's the interesting thing. They come and knock on your door. Maybe more should, right? So let's jump into first Indigenous values. So we do a lot of work with First Nation Major Projects Coalition in Canada, and they talk about integrating Indigenous values into projects, into contracts. And often they have they think of nature as something you preserve and nurture and they're custodians for. How do we go about, because they talk in stories, they don't have everything in technical books, how do we integrate their tremendous knowledge and their value system into what we do? And last point, in particular, when there's some stats that more than 60 to 80% of the resources to be mined are either on or adjacent to Indigenous land. So this is not a flippant issue. Again, I might open first to you, Vicente, and then open to anybody else on this. Yeah.
Right. It's an interesting point, but think about when we have people from different jurisdictions interacting, we have to find a common way to communicate.
Yes.
It's all about finding the language that is able to transport that communication. So that's, and we've been doing that for centuries, in humanity. So that shouldn't be a challenge, we figured that out, for long ago. Also, if you consider like several of the standards today, they require that, the concerns of the project affected community, principle 1 of the GISTM, are incorporated into the design. So there's no other way. You're going to have to do it.
Yeah.
It's just less comfortable. Usually engineers, they like to stay within their bubble and interacting within them, but eventually they will have to step outside that comfort zone and interact with First Nations communities around so that they collect their knowledge and integrate into the designs.
Yeah. And Robin, I know you have a strong feeling about this.
My first quick remark would be quite facetious and is listen to what people have to say and listen well so you actually understand what's being said. And I think also the context, and I mentioned this yesterday, is that if we look at the context about natural capital versus social capital in urban populations, that distance is quite great. If we come into interact with indigenous communities, they're the same thing. They come together, and we have to take that as value. And then another comment would be about what is science, right?
Yes.
It's about, it might not be laboratory based, it might not be numerically based, but it's based on observation, it's based on experiential learning, and we have to leverage that into making good decisions on how we work in those environments. So I would leave it at that.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point, to value observation-based knowledge, right? And we don't. So,
I
Ali?
think, thank you, Peter. I think, let's be frank, there is no this or that. I think it's a formula and integration of everything. The local community is very crucial to succeed of this industry. This is one of the oldest activities of human being, the side of agriculture and fishing. So it's very important to all of us, but I think it should be built into trust. A public hearing, participation, and openness with the stakeholder is very important to the succeed of this industry. But on the other side, we need to be holistic in our approach on how we solve risks. So we have to be open to data, we have to be open to science to make sure we take the right decision also.
Okay. So Terry, I might ask you, you got a comment here? Yeah, go
Yeah, I'm going to talk a little bit more to my African experience, because I think protected areas and mines share this challenge, because in many ways protected areas impose certain limits on people living in them. And I think finding alternative livelihoods and doing sort of proper institutionalized long-term community development is where it's at. And creating sort of meaningful alternatives and building resilience in communities. So I think there's a wealth of knowledge that must be available, both in the mining and protected area sectors, that can be shared to build and further develop this body of knowledge and the practice.
Yeah, just getting those people and convening the people together for that. Robin, maybe pose this one to you, as we talked about before. How do you go about integrating into the mine design from day one, not only what the mine will look like at the end, but the whole nature positive from day one? And what would you recommend, or how do you think how we should think about getting there?
So one of the biggest challenges, as Vincent and I talked about, we don't always have good baseline, and it's understanding how we have that baseline together and working with different types of technologies, as we talked about. How can we predict what will be the impact on biodiversity or ecological systems? Now, we have lots of data which will allow us to know where the holes are in those systems, and we can gather that data and integrate that going forward. But also we have to think about my biggest concern is the timeline. A mine might work for 30 years, then it closes. But that impact is way beyond that, and that's beyond multi-generational. So whatever we do has to be able to fail safely within the environmental context over a long term. And that maybe means a complete change in how we look at things, and we talk to local people. What do they want? What will be the impact on them? And how do we leverage the science that we have and apply it to solving those solutions?
Interesting, yeah. Vicente, you looked at this area,
So I think, we should look this from the closure perspective.
Yes.
Once closure, once closure is clearly defined, what closure means, how much that will cost, what needs to be delivered back once the operational life cycle is over, you're going to have to factor close into your design, factor close into your operation, in your maintenance, in all of that, you know. So I think, the end of the process is how we're going to make the entire process, work differently. Otherwise, you can't close.
You can't close, exactly, yeah.
If you
or
can
closure might be a bit ugly.
Yeah, or if you can't close, you're not going to be in compliance.
Yeah. Other, Ali?
Yeah, I think adding to what our colleagues and the panelists are saying, I think let me speak it from context of the business themselves. They understand money, they understand dollar. By law, it is there. They have to have a good planning, putting the assessment, doing the right closure plan and everything. But let's speak now from the context of the business itself. I think the planning and doing from the first stage and the feasibility study, doing all this study and making those closure planning, it will save money if not doing it actually in the beginning. In the end, there will be a violation because of non-compliance, there will be impact because of the pollution, we will lose other resources like water scarcity we have in Saudi Arabia, the land degradation and other. The cost is going to be so higher in the end of the chain. But if we put it in the plan, we'll save a lot of money on investor.
That's good. Terry?
What keeps me up at night? So
Yes.
I have a sort of a very particular view that we undervalue the cost of production because natural capital isn't factored into it. And I don't want to use a bad pun, but natural capital accounting is a minefield in itself. But I often wonder if we started to value environment a little bit beyond its extractive and tangible benefit, how that would change the restoration narrative and the end-of-life narrative for mines and other industries as well. So I don't have the answer, but it's a question that sits
It's floating
in the
up
back of
there.
my mind.
Oh. I think that leads into another kind of question in my mind is, obviously the industry is thinking about, how do I develop and get to first production faster? So can that live at the same time with protecting the environment, integrating biodiversity from day one? Do you think they are complementary goals, or are they? Because sometimes people go, "Oh, that sounds like it's going to slow things down," because there's more consultation, more discussion. How do you guys think about this? You'd like to? So
I think it's totally complementary.
Vicente, then Ali, yeah.
If you usually, the environmental process goes through the legal and formal phase, and then consultation, and then communities. So it's in sequence. So then you deal with problems along the way. It's all about collaboration. How can you engage, the communities, the regulators, the environmental agencies, shareholders and stakeholders all together, and you discuss what's feasible, what are the concerns, and what are the possibilities, and you negotiate all that there. But to fundamentally get this done, you need to build trust.
Yes.
And trust is, a very scarce commodity in the mining industry.
Really is, yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, so Ali, yeah.
Yeah, again, I think the trust is the main outcome of the complexity of the formula we want to put here. The value chain of mining is huge. So many participants and stakeholders that need to involve. So to build that trust and to even fulfill the target and vision that we have as Saudi Arabia, to make Saudi Arabia as a benchmark from mining sustainability, protecting the biodiversity, but understanding the fast track and the challenge of fast track to move forward to exploit those mines and become a green exchange as a Saudi Arabia for the world. And I think the rule is on the business side. The business side has really to build the initiative needed to make sure that they build this trust. They have to work with all stakeholders. As a government, we are open, mind and heart to them to see how we could improve with the holistic approach, with the right standard and solution for every certain type of mining. But in the end, they have to come as a business, as a coalition, how they're going to solve all the risk coming from their industry.
Sure. That's interesting, yeah. So Terry?
Yeah, I was going to say, we all know the story about the tortoise and the hare, right?
Yes.
And so sometimes you need to go a little bit slower to go a little faster. But I also think that part of the challenge is that environmental protection does undeniably imply a cost for the mining sector.
Sure.
And that cost can be selectively absorbed. So your smaller companies who are often involved in the earlier, more riskier parts of the process don't have the same deep pockets, the same appetite. So I think there's a conversation and a balance to be achieved around the cost that this imposes with its value longer term and how it's brought into the sector, and in particular the smaller companies.
So I think I like your notion of go slower to go faster. So I think Quellaveco, the Anglo-American mine in Peru, is a good example. So nearly 10 years ago, they did a reset. They just paused everything because everything was going badly. And Mark Kudafani, using the development partner principles, they sat down with communities and everybody for 18 months of conversation. People go, you're crazy, to really get down to what is it people wanted. And they completely scrapped everything Anglo had thought about, and there's a lot of redesign, and ended up the project, even with COVID, came pretty well much on time, and they've got an operation that's going very well. We see the MMG mine in another part of Peru shut down because of community action. So I think that's a good example of go slower to go faster, because I think sometimes and Ali, you mentioned this too, we miss these repercussions of not doing things up front, so we've all mentioned that. Last point before we go is, we have a huge legacy, right? So we've talked about new mines and everything, but we've got gazillions of tailing dams, open pit mines. What do we got, that are just lying around everywhere around the world? What do we need to do about those? Because we need to start somewhere, right? So
first we need to understand what are the legacies that are out there. So we don't understand.
Yeah.
Oftentimes mining companies, they know and they have very good data about their ore body, reserve. But as it moves along the way in terms of how much do they know about their tailings dams and their tailings, the information goes down pretty fast, So first, we need to collect the data and understand what are the legacies, what are the externalities that need to be dealt, need to be cataloged, so that we can put a plan together.
Yeah, takes time,
it's
right?
Doable, takes time, and it's better to do before an emergency than in a situation as happened in Brazil after and in response to an emergency.
Yeah, so should Robin?
I think Vincent picks up on a really good point there. It's about that. Within an operation, do we essentially audit what our element deportment is, those things which might cause problems? Do we understand the rock property or the physical properties of all the materials going through that cycle at each point? Do we understand how they interact with biology as biology recolonizes those places? The answer is no. We don't measure everything we need to measure. We don't understand what the implications are. When it comes to the legacy stuff, do we have to start from scratch? And do we look at that as just being a risk, or do we also look at that as being an opportunity where, as processing technologies improve, as our understanding of environmental processes improve, can we genuinely look at remining parts of these things? Can they pay for their own restoration?
Yeah.
What are the technical limitations for doing that, and what are the limitations for communities in doing that? So I would put that out there as a question we have to answer.
And Ali, standards, where do they play in all this?
I think from Saudi context, I think we took the first and the second step as a government, where we understand today, we make the survey, we understand the legacy issues, and even we calculate the cost of restoration or remediation. The strategy of environment 2 years ago or 3 years ago make the cost of land degradation or environmental degradation to 86 billion real annually. To restore, we think equal to 2 billion reals to solve the legacy issues.
Okay.
The issue is how we work with the Ministry of Industry and Mineral and with the business to make a plan to solve all those legacy issues.
Okay, fantastic. Terry, you get the last word.
I think just a hopeful note, perhaps, what they say, the journey of 1,000 miles starts with making it up 100 steps. And I think the mining sector has gone beyond commitment, and I think we're in the 100 steps. And it will take time, but I think we're on the road, and that's
good,
the key thing.
So I think the message we're hearing, it's a very complex area, but we can integrate nature and biodiversity net positive into mining today, both legacy and new mines. Collaboration is the key, and I love the phrase, go slow to go fast, so we can listen and catalogue and integrate everybody's values. So thank you for your time, and guys, thank you very much, and join me in thanking our panelists. Thank you.